Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the America's Founding Series, part of the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I am glad you could join me today. Make sure to subscribe and follow the podcast so you never miss an episode, and share this episode with others so they too can hear the great stories of the great patriots who helped shape this nation. We're talking the forgotten patriots, because I want you to imagine the world's most powerful, most disciplined, most professional army marching through your quiet colonial street. They are retreating. They're angry. They're firing at everything that moves. And you're a 78-year-old man, just a few months shy of your 79th birthday. Now, most men at this age of their life, particularly back then, are thanking God they made it this far. But not our forgotten patriot today. Not Samuel Whittemore. In the small town of Menatomi, Massachusetts, one old veteran did the unthinkable. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He grabbed his musket, loaded a brace of dueling pistols, drew his old military sword, and decided, today is the day I stand between tyranny and my home. And he's the focus of this America's Founding Series episode, because we're looking for the American grit that built this nation that doesn't seem to exist anymore. We're looking for the conviction that liberty is not something granted by a faraway institution, but something defended by an individual. And so I want to tell the story of a nearly 80-year-old farmer and veteran took on the British Empire single-handedly. Now, Samuel Whittemore was born in 1695. Think about that time frame. His life stretched across nearly a century of colonial existence. And towards the latter stage of his life, obviously major changes were occurring. This was not a man shaped by political theory. He was shaped by the realities of colonial life. He was a farmer, a landowner, a veteran who fought in two major conflicts. He served in King George's War and fought the French. He fought their allies. He knew the cost of war. He understood the hard reality of war, death, and destruction. But he also knew how to survive on his own. He was not a wealthy man. He was not part of the Boston elite, the aristocracy, but he was known locally for his toughness and his independent streak. He was also known for his sharp mind. By April 1775, Samuel Whittemore had earned the right to simply sit on his porch. He'd paid his dues to society. He paid his dues to the crown. Yet his life experience had taught him an invaluable lesson. The defense of your natural rights is not an inherited trust fund. It is a current active responsibility. The independence he felt on his farm was the independence that he wanted to pass down to his children and future generations of Americans. And that spirit of self-reliance wasn't philosophical talking points. It was how he lived his life. Then on April 19th, that self-reliance was about to be put to the ultimate test. The world remembers Lexington and Concord 250 years ago. But the real sustained carnage of that day happened during the British retreat back to Boston. The Redcoat column, exhausted and humiliated, was being harassed relentlessly by American militia companies and the Minutemen. They were shadowing them. And from the woods, behind the stone walls, along the battle road, the fighting intensified drastically as the British were passing through small community of Menatomi. Today, we know it as Arlington. This area saw some of the fiercest, bloodiest, and most desperate fighting of the entire day. This wasn't a battlefield that was chosen by generals. It was an ordinary New England road that became a killing ground, and it was only in a matter of minutes. Civilians, knowing the column was coming, armed themselves. Homes became battlegrounds. Women and children were hidden in basements as the sounds of battle roared through the village. And Whittemore, approaching his 79th birthday, watched the tide of professional soldiers, the 47th Regiment of Foot and the detachment of Marines, marching toward his property. His neighbors expected him to find shelter. The organized militia was further down the road. No one would have blamed him for staying back, staying at a fight. The fighting was too intense. The odds were impossible. But Whittemore's decision at this moment, is the very definition of the founding spirit we need to resurrect today. Because he wasn't acting out of rage, and he certainly wasn't acting from impulse. In his mind, if a man waits for someone else to defend his liberty, then he's already surrendered it. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for orders. He didn't wait for an organized governmental body to defend his home. He acted because he believed liberty was his personal responsibility. He believed he worked hard, earned his property, and it's his to defend. So he positioned himself behind a low stone wall near his property, armed with his musket and 2 pistols, 3 instruments of war. And as the column approached, he waited until the British were right on top of him. This was not a general firing from a distance. This was a deadly close confrontation. Whittemore fires his musket. Soldier drops. He immediately tosses the musket aside, draws his pistol. He fires both, taking down 2 more of the world's finest soldiers. The shock and fury of the British being ambushed by some elderly guy, it must have been immense. A detachment of soldiers rushes toward the stone wall, intent on capturing or killing this relentless old man. And before he can even attempt to reload, they're upon him. Whittemore draws his sword and, now completely outnumbered, charges them. But the fight is over almost before it even begins. The soldiers fire, hitting him in the face. Then they descend upon him with the cold, brutal steel of their bayonets, and the soldiers bayoneted Samuel Whittemore repeatedly, 13 bayonet wounds. They left him for dead in a pool of his own blood. Now, we need to take a quick break, but when we return, we're going to talk about the impossible and the 4 powerful lessons this single act teaches us about true American grit and the antidote to today's government dependency. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain and stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Well, discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers. These are the 2 most important types that make up 90% of the collagen found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. They provide maximum benefits. And Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. It doesn't clump, it absorbs fast thanks to its peptide formula. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a brand you could trust. They offer an 800 number for any questions you may have, and then you'll speak to a real person who's there to help. Visit getnativepath.com/PAS and start your transformation today. That's getnativepath.com/PAS. Welcome back to the America's Founding Series, part of the P.A.S. Report podcast. Now, I'd really appreciate if you share this episode with others so that the podcast continues to grow. Post it on your social media accounts. Tag me. I'll give you a follow. The reality is we don't know a lot about our history anymore. And if we want to defend something, we kind of need to know what we're defending. So today we're talking about the sheer grit and determination of a great patriot, Samuel Whittemore. Before the break, this old man was shot in the face and was bayoneted up to 13 times. When Whittemore's neighbors finally reached the stone wall, they found the scene of carnage. And the old man, riddled with bayonet wounds, shot in the face, was barely conscious. But here is the detail that truly defines how tough this guy was, truly defines the spirit he had. Whittemore was reportedly struggling to reload his musket to continue to fight. Now, a nearby doctor is going to be called in. He examines him and he declares, these wounds are too great. There's no way. The bullet to the face, the bayonet thrust, he's not going to survive the night. And so he was left in the care of his family, waiting for the inevitable. But Samuel Whittemore, he didn't die. You know, sometimes the human spirit doesn't follow the rules. Sometimes it refuses to obey the obvious. And against all medical odds, against all common sense, against all reality, the sheer will of this man refused to submit to death. He lived. Not only did he live, he recovered and went on to live for 18 more years. He didn't die until the age of 96. Now, his story was immediately recognized as a local legend, a veteran who was literally stabbed and shot for his independence, and he lived to see the nation he helped create. It was a story too powerful, too gritty, and too American to be forgotten. I mean, you would think it could only come out of Hollywood. But this is real. And in 2005, Massachusetts formally declared him the state's official hero, proving that these lessons are timeless. Whitmore's stand was not an anomaly. It was the epitome of the fighting that day. And we have to reinforce the fact that the American Revolution was not secured by a handful of professional generals, not even professional soldiers, but by thousands of ordinary people, ordinary citizens, making impossibly brave choices. Menatomi, where Whitmore fought, was the deadliest part of the day precisely because civilians were willing to fight house to house to defend their homes. This is a critical insight that goes back to Monday's P.A.S. report episode, where I discussed Americans' growing dependency on government. When people depend on a centralized institution to solve every single problem, liberty becomes theoretical. Do you really have freedom anymore? Because the more the government gets involved, the more liberty is going to contract. It becomes something you vote for or receive. But to the founders and to Whitmore, liberty was personal and it was local. It was something that you defended with your own tools, your own time, and if necessary, your own life. And Whitmore certainly did that. He was a single, self-reliant farmer, and he becomes the perfect symbol for the revolution's core principles. Live free was not an abstract ideal. It was a matter of individual action. Whitmore's story gives us a powerful framework, 4 virtues that stand in direct opposition to the dependency mindset that exists today. We don't need to lecture. We just need to compare. First, self-reliance. Whitmore didn't wait for permission or for the militia to rescue him. His independence was his responsibility. The lesson for us: when we outsource our moral duty, our financial stability, our liberty to a far away centralized government, we grow soft. And Whitmore reminds us that true civic duty is personal. Freedom begins with us taking initiative. Second, the commitment to liberty. He risked everything, not for personal wealth, not for power, not for ego, but to resist what he saw as tyranny encroaching on his community. And the lesson here is simple. The cost of freedom is high. We've grown soft, we're lazy. And if we casually surrender our personal responsibility to the government for comfort of security, we breed this form of dependency that over time dulls the vigilance a free nation depends on. Third, American grit. I talk often on the America's Founding series about this grit. Surviving 13 bayonet wounds, getting shot in the face. That's the ultimate demonstration of resilience. And the lesson is overcoming adversity. Overcoming adversity requires a gritty spirit. He refused to give up fighting, even though he was severely wounded. Now, obviously, we don't have to go that extreme, but we have to show that same level of resilience in defending our founding principles against what we're seeing today, against the erosion. Unfortunately, so many passively accept government overreach. So many have become reliant on entitlements. And that brings me to the fourth thing, civic courage. This is perhaps the most profound lesson. Because despite being an elderly civilian facing the most powerful military in the world, Whitmore chose to stand his ground alone. His act was a non-negotiable rejection of submission. And the lesson for us all is the erosion of liberty often occurs slowly because it's easier to comply with government dictates than to resist them. Sometimes civic courage requires us to do uncomfortable things. Sometimes it means we have to have moral clarity to stand against whatever the prevailing tide is out there, even when we're outnumbered, even when we're ostracized and mocked and ridiculed. Now, I know that contrasts sharply with what's going on today, where people don't want to be outside the groupthink model. They want comfort above all else. But the reason I tell Whitmore's story is not to scold anyone, but to remember where the American character comes from. His story is a powerful reminder of the type of citizen who built this nation. Whitmore was ready, he was capable, and he was competent. He was willing to act independently of institutional support when the crisis demanded it. Today we face challenges, not from redcoats, but from an overwhelming bureaucratic state that promises to be everything to everyone, makes us dependent in the process, and then abuses its power routinely. Whitmore's message echoes across the centuries. Our liberty is not the government's responsibility. It is our responsibility, and one that we have to take seriously. Unfortunately, too many take their liberty for granted, and so many Americans believe that it's the government that grants us our natural God-given rights. The greatest defense against dependency is not a new law. It's not politicians. It's just returning to some fundamental truths. It's returning to that gritty, self-reliant spirit that built America. It's understanding the spirit of a man who at 78 refused to wait for a hero to save him and instead became the hero himself. Now, Samuel Whittemore is not famous today. Most people have no idea who he is, and you're not going to find his face on any currency. But his courage speaks volumes across the centuries. It reminds us that the preservation of the Republic rests with us, not the strength of the central government, but the independence and the courage of its individual citizens. And Whitmore's story challenges each of us to do better, to consider what we too are capable of when liberty calls. Now, if this story resonated with you, share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. Share the episode. Teach about the grit that helped build this nation. I want to thank you for tuning into America's Founding Series, part of the P.A.S. Report podcast, and I'll be back next week with some more great episodes.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.